Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Inside the Birds. It's Adam Caplan and Andrew DiCecco, our man who was on the scene in Los Angeles last week, and actually for the big game, the Eagles and the Rams. And Andrew, I gotta first start with this. A, had you been to Los Angeles before? And B, this time, if this is your second time, third or fifth, whatever the amount, did you do anything differently? Or if this is your first time, what did you wind up doing leading up to the game?
This was my second time.
Yeah.
I went to the game. I covered the game last year at SoFi, but I was going from San Francisco to LA because I was visiting family. So I didn't get a chance to really go to LA proper. There's not much to do in Inglewood. And I just kind of hung out in the hotel and then I went. But this time on Saturday, I got a chance to hang out in West Hollywood. I went to the Whiskey A Go Go to see a show. I went to the Viper Room to see a show. I
Wow.
had I had dinner at the Rainbow Bar and Grill. I caught up with a friend. I had coffee, so I got a lot done. I walked up and down Sunset Boulevard.
That's awesome, man. Because the Whiskey A Go-Go is so famous from the 60s and all the
Yeah,
bands and the Doors are one of the biggest ones to play out there. But that's awesome, man. So here's the next thing. So you're leading up to the game on Sunday. Back here in Philly, a lot of people were juiced for this game. I know a lot of people flew there. In fact, some friends of mine were texting me during the game saying it was sort of like a decent Eagles crowd. Did you get that feeling being being at the game rather, and leading up to it that there was a big Eagles contingent of fans?
yeah, Adam, from the press box, you can hear a deafening crowd roar when the Eagles took the field, when the Eagles made a big play, when the crowd took exception to a call. And if it favored if it was against the Eagles, you heard the crowd was took a exception to it. So it very much felt like maybe a light home game out there. And if you look around the crowd, there's a lot of Kelly Green that I saw. So I mean, Eagles fans travel really well, and that was no exception.
All right, let's get to the game. Then we got a lot to get into. Roster moves. We got some intel on them. Updated injury report, not only for the Eagles, but for the Ravens. We'll get to that later in the show. But first, let's get to your thoughts. You were at the game. You also broke the news to us. We were doing the live stream, Jeff and I, after the game, and you said that BG told you guys that he was done. He had the torn triceps. So we'll get your reaction and what you think what's going to happen going forward here. So, all right. So the Eagles do win. They grinded it out again. An incredible victory considering, on the road, hostile environment. Obviously, the Eagles. Well, I shouldn't even say hostile. It was kind of even between the Rams and Eagles fans, but it's a road win, phenomenal win, and Nick Sirianni is great on the road. But this is another road win for this football team. Let's get your thoughts here on the win and what you saw there.
Yeah, early on, it looked like the Rams were moving. They moved the football pretty well. The Eagles get a timely turnover, but I think the story there, Adam, was the Eagles' ability to adjust. The Rams came out with a lot of quick stuff, the quick game, and kind of like the Bucs did to a degree. And I thought that the Eagles did a good job of countering that. The defense really kept them in it. Saquon Barkley, what more can you say about him? He got off once he started getting rolling. There was no turning back. And one thing I'll say about the Eagles' offensive line, when you watch from the vantage point that we got to see, you get to see like the blocking that's really taking shape there. And Mekhi Becton doesn't get a lot of recognition given that they have Cam Jurgens, Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, Landon. But I thought he was excellent. But that offensive line, they play a bully style of football where they wear on teams late in games. The Rams started out with some energy and burst defensively, and they quickly wore them down. And I think that is the secret weapon to this Eagles offense. They imposed their will from start to finish and were extremely physical at the point of attack. And then it allowed the dam to eventually break and Saquon Barkley 270+ yard runs.
So you just mentioned the two runs, which were in the second half. Did the like a kid here? Because when you're in the press box, sometimes you can't really tell how the crowd's reacting. But I
Mm-hmm.
know from going to the link and then the vet before that, obviously what you're talking about home games for the Eagles, but when there's an incredibly exciting play, everybody goes out of their mind. And us in the press box, we're not supposed to react. But every once in a while, you can't help yourself if you like football and you go, wow, I can't believe I just saw that. Seeing what Barkley did in this game, which is the ninth best game in NFL history for a running back, did you see, and again, this is something I rarely bring up, but as a reporter, again, you're not supposed to get emotional. You're not supposed to react at all. Did you feel like, did I just see that? Like, what were your thoughts when you saw these two runs?
I mean, the most I got out of myself was I quietly said, "Wow!" Just seeing like that 72 yarder. I don't really show show much of anything one way or
Exactly.
the other. I was just sitting there
Sure.
writing my observations. But when you really take a step back and you assess the performance that he did, Adam, 302 all-purpose yards. I think Mekhi Becton, I was in when he was talking, and he said that he didn't even realize it, but he looked up at one point. It said 231 up there, and he said that he told Lane, he goes, in colorful terms, he said, "Eff it, let's go for 300." But I think that you saw everybody rally around that, and it was something where it's like, let's get the record here. And Mekhi Becton didn't even know that it was a record until after, but he said it was cool to be a part of history. But yeah, I just think that every week he does something superhuman, Saquon Barkley, and it just becomes a normality.
Let's go to the locker room after the game. We'll get to BG in a minute, but obviously they have to be jubilant in terms of the win. But was it okay? So you've told us, you told us last year how you would go in the locker room when they'd win. They had in that credible streak when they were 10-1, but they were sort of like not satisfied, which you shouldn't be, but they weren't a happy football team. What's the difference when you go in a locker room like this when they have an incredible victory on the road? What was this locker room like?
I wouldn't even say it was jubilant. It was more like we took care of business type of
Yeah,
mentality.
this is
There's an
like
air of confidence there, and they're fixating on the next game. Obviously, there were teammates that were happy for each other. Milton Williams had 2 sacks. Jalen Carter was really excited for him. But then you saw the other side of things. You saw someone like a Jordan Mailata who was clearly shaken up about what had just happened to Brandon Graham. He mentioned how much Brandon meant to him, and he mentioned that he shed tears in the locker room or when he got the news after the game. So
hmm.
there was some somberness there because Brandon Graham's obviously a key component and a locker room pillar. And more than that, he's just a mentor and just a great guy. You've been around him. He radiates
Oh yeah.
positive energy. And you saw like the impact that had on a lot of his teammates.
So let's get to the defense. Obviously we could talk about Graham, and then we'll go over our thoughts on what they'll do going forward to help replace him, which you really can't do. But someone's got to take the snaps. But I just thought the defense, after you mentioned that slow start, man, they gashed them a little bit. I thought the Kyron Williams turnover really, that you don't want to say it cost them the game, but it changed everything. That sudden change changed a lot. But what are your thoughts overall on what you saw from the defense?
I thought that they answered a question that I had, and how are they going to be able to adjust and counter when a team was getting off like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were? Because in the past, that's been the issue. They haven't been able to make those in-game adjustments. But I think that they did a really good job in that area. Losing Slay, that's something that I don't think is a little bit under discussed the past couple of days because they went right after Isaiah
Yep.
Rodgers to a decent degree of success. I just thought that Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, again, I don't think we can call that test anymore. Like they've answered every test that's been in front of them over the 7 game win streak. They're just good. They answer the bell every time. I thought that they really look. Puka Nacua had 117 yards. I think some of those yards were hollow. Cooper Kupp caught a touchdown late in that game. The game was already out of reach at that point. So within the context of the game, I thought that both players answered the challenge. Reed Blankenship, CJ Gardner Johnson, really good on the communication on the back end. Reed Blankenship, my understanding is he is the ultimate guy who sort of directs traffic back there. So I thought that was really evident watching that throughout the game. Linebacker play was good. I just think that this defense continues to get better the more they play with each other and the more reps they get, and it's very apparent that Rams offense is no slouch, and the Eagles answered that challenge.
I thought their D line was phenomenal. Jalen Carter continues to play consistently great football. It's kind of remarkable what he's doing right now. He's getting double teamed like crazy. It opens it up for other people.
N'Kobe
Uh,
Dean had a really, really good game.
how about that blitz? Yeah.
He
Yeah.
destroyed. I told him, I said, you destroyed that running back on that play. He slapped because he's a power rusher and he comes through with such force that running backs now are trying to cut block him. I mean, they're gonna have to find some way because you can't stop the Kobe Dean when he gets going with a full head of steam.
You and I saw him in training camp. I just remember this one practice. It was like you and I were like we're at the opposite part of the end zone, and the drive was starting at the other side. So basically, I had my glasses on so I could see some of it. And I can't remember what number is Dean? Is he 17? Does that sound right?
17, yeah.
Harold Carmichael's number. So he blitzed and he basically just broke the play up, and they're like start over because they didn't block him. You just and it
There,
just it's
there was
ironic.
one
You
play.
just said it.
There
Go
was
ahead.
one play where he blocked. He took on Will Shipley and really blocked him into the quarterback. Like
Might have
he
been it.
has a,
Yeah.
he has a ton of power.
Yeah, I know, and remember, as you know, you were there. You saw in training camp. He built his body up. He looks good. It's it he's been an unbelievable story considering what he's been through injury wise, and you just didn't know. I mean, we saw this to start training camp, scratching my head like, man, I don't know if this guy's going to get it. We know he's come back from a very serious injury, the Liz Frank injury, and the bad one, the 9-month rehab. And it was that practice the link where that was really bad. That's where he kind of bottomed out. I
Kenny
guess there's
Gainwell got him.
only way you could go is up. So let's talk about him and Bond together, right? This has been one of those most remarkable stories. Bond in particular, because no one saw this. Bond did it again. He had some really big plays here. What's next for Zach Bond here?
Uh, Not maybe a Pro Bowl recognition, but he's actually making plays in coverage now. You saw that in the Jags game. They tested him down the sideline to Evan Ingram. He's gotten his hands on some passes. I just think that the more he plays, the more comfortable he gets. He knows you don't fool him twice. Once he sees something once, he really processes things. He diagnoses things very quickly. Highly intelligent player. He's more of the lead by example type, and Nakobe Dean is the more vocal player of the two. He wears the green dot. They're both very in tune with what's going on all three levels of the defense, and the communication has been very seamless between the two. And it helps that they're really tight. It's a close knit group, that linebacker room, but particularly with those two, they consider themselves really close friends. And I think you see that manifest on the field in the way that they're able to kind of pass things off and really make it so that you don't really see breakdowns on that second level.
No, you don't. And I want to get to something that you've talked about on our show before, going back to last year's locker room and football team. We know the communication on the match carry deliver is really good. You see it from game to game, but that's just on the field. But in the locker room, obviously there's something missing last year. What is it? Is it because Nick Sirianni's got everything together right now? Guys are buying in. Like, why is this team as tight knit? It seems very obvious, even if you're not in the locker room. It seems like these guys love. Look, it helps when you win, but they were 10-1 last year, and they were unhappy. What is it you think has brought this team closer together? Go ahead.
I think when you see results, Adam, naturally you're going to continue to buy in even more because what they're being taught is you see the proof is in the pudding. They have position coaches. We talked about them last time you and I spoke, that their ability to communicate and convey their coaching points in a way that really resonates. I think having someone like a Christian Parker, who is 32 years old, so he's pretty close in age, he finds a way to relate to the defensive backs. Bobby King talks a lot about block deconstruction. We're seeing that be emphasized from both Nakobe Dean and Zach Bond. Clint Hurt has done a very good job in finding a way to tap in and maximize the potential of Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Milton Williams, who had 2 sacks the other night. I think that when you see that kind of a buy-in, it's because you're seeing results. And that to me really has been the big improvement that I've seen from last season. And also last season, there was a ton of, I guess you can call them mercenaries that joined the team late. Kevin Byard, Bradley Roby, Julio Jones. And you're not necessarily as immersed in the culture. You're not as invested because you're joining the team on a 1-year deal. You're not there since training camp. And when you see someone like a Sean Desai, who you maybe have some questions about, you're not sure about his ability to command a room, and there's some questions there, I think naturally that you might see guys tend to go their own way. And I think all of that sort of transpired into what you saw last season in their skit.
Yeah, very well said. Very well said. All right, next up, let's get to the transactions and explain kind of what we think is going to happen going forward. So, of course, Brandon Graham's done for the season and playoffs. Torn left triceps. I believe it's his left, by the way. That's the back of your arm. That's a very serious injury. Now, BG did say on WIP, and I know he broke down a little bit with John Ritchie and Joe DeCamara. He's going to go through the rehab, and he's just going to see where he's at and where the Eagles are at. So can't rule out another season, and he will be 37 in
Next year. Yeah.
April. Wow, this is like crazy. And let me ask you this question. Again, you were at the game. Could you tell from the press box? Because on TV, see, we don't get you could see it on Amazon if the game was on Amazon because you can get the all 22 looks, but you can't on television. But you're there, the press box, folks. Just so you know, you could depending on the configuration. I want to get into that with you in a second. At SoFi, I haven't been to SoFi, so I don't know. But some press boxes, you could really see the entire field. Could you see BG taking over in the second quarter before he got hurt?
Absolutely. And the way that it was angled, you just saw him. He sees things before they happen, and that's a lot of the veteran savvy. But
Yeah.
he hits people with a purpose, and that sounds funny enough. But the way that when he sacked Matt Stafford, he made sure that he felt it. He reads run plays. He fills the gaps. He knows exactly where the play is going. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that he was the Eagles' most impactful defensive player that game. That was certainly Brandon's best game of the season. One tackle, one sack. I think he had three quarterback hits, two tackles for loss. He was just impacting the game. And when he walked off, Adam, and you see the longer conversation with him and Jalen Hurts, and you see guys patting him on the back, there's
Yeah,
longer conversations that typically don't accompany an injury of that
sure.
situation. So you kind of
Yeah.
got the sense that okay, this might be something that's going to be for an extended period. And then, sure enough, right after the game, we go right up to him and he goes, "I'm out for the season." And
Oh,
he's always
well,
so
yeah.
lighthearted that you're like,
Yeah,
initially you're
exactly.
like, and he goes, "I tore my tricep." So
Yeah,
that
it's a
that was kind of
tough
one
deal.
something that you see the way that he handled it. And I think for me, the thing that I'll never forget throughout my career is the fact that that was, for all intents and purposes, his final game. The team is doing so well, and knowing that he's not even going to be a part of it, he took it in stride. He was really positive about it. He instead looked at it and tried to put a positive spin. I'm going to take on a new role, but as a leader, the mission's still the mission, he said, and he's going to kind of try to impart wisdom and guide the young players. And he said he's pretty much said they should be happy that I am out. And yeah, he
Oh,
laughed after that.
yeah.
Like he said that the other team should be worried, should be happy that I'm out because he was pretty much wreaking havoc. But I just think for him to be able to process things the way that he did and take it all in stride, I think there's a lot of folks that could take that message and really apply it to themselves.
I was saying to Jeff in the postgame show, I can't remember watching football in my career covering 32 teams. And Jeff brought up a great point. I was like, let's see if we could find a name, someone in their late 30s that was not a quarterback or a kicker, punt, so a skill position player or a defensive player. And he came up with Darrell Green, who, by the way, retired when he was 40. Now, Darrell Green was not the same player at 38 that he was at 30 or 32 or 33. But what Brandon Graham has done this season in particular lately, we just mentioned how he literally took the game over. He blows run plays up. He's unbelievable against the run because he's short, he's stocky, short to he's short to the ground. He's under 6'2". You mentioned the veteran savvy. He knows how to do it. Technique wise, he's really good. You typically wouldn't see a guy under 6'2" playing nickel inside, as the Eagles have done for many years. But let's get to this now. And we'll get into Charles Harris, who's going to replace him in the 53. That's how they did the transaction. How do you see this going forward? What will they do with his snaps?
Well, it's a big ask for Jalen Hunt to take that leap, and probably a little unfair and unrealistic at this point. Look, Jalen Hunt has done a great job behind the scenes. He's developing quicker than anyone could have expected. But probably at this stage, you would like to see him take on 10 to 12 snaps as he, gradually works into catches up to the NFL speed and acclimates. But now he's going to have to probably play 25, maybe more than that.
A lot.
The
Mm.
Nolan Smith is the big key here because he's really turned the corner and he's now playing with more power at the point of attack. He has moves, pass rush moves in his tool bag there. So I do believe that he's going to be someone who reaps the benefits and probably benefits most from the absence. But Josh Sweat, another player, 7 sacks. What you have to worry about his snap share because last season he played 828 and by the end
Mm.
of the season, he seemed gassed. So they're going to have to find a way to sort of manage that, I would say. And Charles Harris is going to have to look. Charles Harris is a player who, when you look at the circumstances, you're not going to get anything better than this at this stage of the season. You're getting a 29-year-old player who started 6 games, 66% of the snaps for the Panthers, 3 sacks. So he's played and he's in game shape, and he's a veteran who's played in, I believe, 99 games. So all things considered, I think the Eagles did the best they could to patch it up.
Yeah, Charles Harris. So here's what happened with him. And by the way, this is his fifth team. He turns 30 next year. He was in the draft with Derek Barnett. Eagles actually liked him a lot. I don't have the chart in front of me. There were like 6 players that they liked for that draft. Charles Harris was one of them, but they took Derek Barnett. Both players have moved on from the original teams, particularly Charles Harris, who was drafted by the Dolphins. He was a bust for them. It didn't work. How bad of a bust was he? All they got was a 7th round pick from the Falcons in 2020. I mean, that tells you they don't want him. It's not very good for a guy that you drafted in the first round. He just didn't really do anything. With Atlanta, he didn't do much. Detroit brought him in on a 1-year deal, did very well, had a career high 7.5 sacks, but it wasn't just those sacks. Sacks are individual plays. He actually played pretty well, so much so that they re-signed him for 2 years, gave him over $7 million a year. Then the next year in 22, he got hurt. And then they brought him back. 23 didn't do well, kind of got benched. And then you saw him move on, as you mentioned, to Carolina. And they cut him. He was waived. And by the way, so after the trade deadline, every single player that's cut has to go through waivers, and the veterans go through waivers until through the Super Bowl, and then once training camp starts, excuse me, once the free agency starts, then the contracts are terminated instead of waived. But bottom line is, this is his fifth team. He is sort of a journeyman here. You made a very good point here. This is the kind of player that's probably out there on the street, but here's the difference: he's actually with a football team. Whereas, you bring a guy out. Let's say it was going to be Melvin Ingram, right? Who was with Miami last year with Vic briefly. You got to see what kind of shape he's in. You don't know what kind of shape he's in, quite frankly, and you don't know when he's going to be ready. Where Charles Harris is physically ready because he was just with the football team, and now he's on the 53, by the way. So now they'll get him into practice this week. They'll see how he looks. So they'll see how quickly he can learn it. He's been a stand-up pass rusher a lot of his career. This is nothing new for him. And by the way, Carolina plays their version of what Vic is doing. So that Andrew, this is a smart move. I'm not saying he's going to do anything, but he's going to have to play because they don't have the bodies right now at edge. He's going to have to.
Yeah, and like we said, he is still relatively productive. He had 3 sacks, so it's not like he can't get to the quarterback anymore. In a limited capacity, I think he could do far worse at this stage of the season. So I mean, this is what they got. I mean, the other options were Teron Jackson on the practice squad, KJ Henry, who was just signed to the practice squad today. Yep. So I think, given the resources that were at their disposal, I think that they did the best they could to kind of fill that void. And you're not going to replace Brandon Graham off the field or on the field, but with the Eagles not having Bryce Huff, who had that procedure last week, so the thinking is that he can help them and come back for the stretch run. But not having Bryce Huff, not having Brandon Graham, they had to do something. I think that was a smart move.
Yeah. Honestly, the kind of guys who are out there are it's like people on Jason Pierre-Paul, right? Ironically, people with Brandon Graham, people remember with Earl Thomas is what everybody wanted. They didn't get him. They didn't get JPP, and they got Brandon Graham. And I still argue Brandon Graham is a better football player than JPP.
He is, yeah.
I know that JPP was a big sack guy, but Brandon was it is a better all-around football player. But bottom line is, they've got Charles Harris in here, who, with Carolina, played under Giro Vero, who's the defensive coordinator for the Panthers, who is a Vic disciple. So this makes sense. I like this move. Now, what other moves did they make? You mentioned they signed KJ Henry to the practice squad. He's an angular pass rusher. What I know teams liked about it, KJ Henry, is, yes, he was a late round draft pick, but he's a son of a coach. You like the measurables, Andrew. And look, he goes to their practice squad, and they don't have to rush this now because they got Charles Harris. You mentioned Teron Jackson. Teron's been in this defense off and on for several years here. So,
and yeah, he had a decent summer too, by the way.
Did he?
Yeah, Teron had a decent summer. He was just buried in terms of edge rushers. Look, he's familiar with the system. Perhaps he gets an elevation at some point because there's not much of a need for a ramp up. He can kind of step right in. But yeah, the options were very limited, and I think the Eagles made the best of a pretty dire circumstance.
Yeah. Eagles signed Teron back after Carolina. By the way, speaking of Carolina, I forgot he was with Carolina. They cut him, and I
remember when he came back, I said, "Welcome back," and he looked at me. He was like, "Man, I'm just glad to be back." He just got the sense that he was just happy to get out of that and now land again with a winning culture.
That's exactly it. And he was a 6th rounder from the Eagles in 2021. So he definitely knows his defense, and he's back. So you would have to think, Andrew, now I know it's early in the week, or really on Wednesday. I got to think he's elevated this week. Why? I mean, honestly,
I do.
You can't just have 4, because again, you nailed it on Alex Hunt. He's been a nice story. He's a little bit ahead of schedule, but he's also very raw. He's still learning how to be an edge rusher, and you can't ask him to play 25, 30 snaps. It's crazy.
I don't think that's realistic, nor do I think that it's fair to kind of throw him in there like that and say, okay, we're going to, sink or swim, when in an ideal circumstance, he would be, playing 10 to 12 and gradually implementing himself into the defense. So, yeah, I do agree with you, Adam. I think Teron Jackson would be the most logical elevation this week. CJ Uzama probably as well for as the third tight end. He has one elevation left, so we'll have to see how
That's
that
true.
goes.
Oh, and by the way, we should mention this because you've told us for weeks that Britton Covey was good to go, and he sure was. He actually had he took the punt. Well, they only had one punt return, and he was it. So, let me ask you this on Britton Covey because I
Yeah.
know it was his first game back. He had been out a while. Do you feel like I know that reporters don't get to see practice really, they only get to see warm-ups and so forth, but you and I saw this. We also saw it in the beginning of the season where Britton was really good as a slot receiver. What are your thoughts on him going forward as potential as a receiver?
Well, he barely played at all against the Rams offensively. It was pretty much
Three
Johnny
snaps.
Wilson. It was Dotson. You didn't see Britton really work in there, which is curious to me because Jalen Hurts has a ton of confidence in Britton Covey. That's known. If you need any proof, just watch about how he peppered him with targets against the Falcons. But I do believe that he can help you situationally because he adds a different dimension to the receiving core. What do I mean
Yeah.
by that? Well, he has really good short area quickness. There's a trust level there with Hurts that he knows that Britton's going to be exactly where he needs to be at all times. And I think that he can help provide some different looks based on his skill set. So we'll have to see if they work him in, if maybe they're just kind of gradually working him back into the mix there.
Yeah, I just thought his training camp and this played to your point. They seem to have really good chemistry. And you mentioned that Atlanta game. I think he caught all six targets in that game. And that I know it's not. Look, he's a short area guy with run after the catch ability and quickness. So we'll see. But that gives them something which they've needed with the edge. So we'll see about that. Just in terms of short area and slot. I mean, not edge, slot. Also, we should mention on the practice squad, Siaki Ika, the former draft pick of the Browns. He was released again from the practice squad. You got to think he's probably going to be back at some point because the Eagles love bringing these guys back when they're trying to make room for another player. And Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint also released. So, Andrew, do you know offhand, does that put them at the limit, or do they
No,
have
I
a
think
spot
they
open?
have. I think they have one spot remaining. They lost two. They signed one.
Okay, okay.
They lost
Hey,
KJ. They signed KJ Henry, but they lost Rosemy Jack Saint and
Ika.
Ika, the
Huh.
defensive tackle. I got to do a little research on the Jack Saint one because it seemed like the Eagles liked him. He has the big frame. It kind of reminds me of Zach Pascal. But I'll have to do a little digging on that. But I that leaves them with one spot remaining.
Yeah, okay. We'll see if they use it. Whether they bring in a veteran, they could use another edge rusher, just a veteran, anyone, just to see what happens. Because right now, you've got Charles Harris who just got here. Yes, he knows the scheme, and you've got Jalen Hunt who's kind of a newbie to this position. He hasn't been playing edge for very long, so we'll see what happens. Of course, Teron Jackson. We'll see by Friday. Well, actually, they have till, by the way, for Saturday. They have Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern to make all roster moves because for a Sunday game. So, Andrew, let me ask you this question as we move on here. So you had the long flight. What was it up to LA? 5.5, 6 hours? Is it about that?
I had a connecting flight in Charlotte
Oh, okay.
both times. So it
Okay.
kind of was nice to break it up a little bit, to be
Okay.
honest. You get to walk around, stretch your legs. But
Sure.
yeah, what was your question
Speak.
though?
Yeah, here's my question. Speaking of stretching, so we have a new partner. One of our partners is Stretch Zone, and I like when I fly, especially long. I like to go there. I usually go the day before. It's hard, usually we fly early. When you and I go to the Senior Bowl, we're leaving usually pretty early.
Yeah.
But I want to feel loose and get stretched. And I got to tell you, Andrew, I'm going today. Today's Wednesday. I'm going today. My left hamstring, I strained it a little bit playing doubles last
Uh-oh.
week. Yeah. Now look, I'm not Devontae Smith, who has a hamstring strain, so I'm not a high class athlete like Devontae. But I got to get it stretched. But it's a very light strain. It doesn't hurt when it feels tight. So I'm gonna get stretched out. And you know this from going to practice. Do you ever watch the train? I'm always observant. You see the trainers, they'll have like one knee on the guy's back, and they'll hold the player's hamstring, and they'll stretch it out. And you
Yeah.
also see that a couple hours before the game. Do you notice stuff when the trainers are working with the players?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely do, especially on Friday when you really see the first 10 minutes
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's mostly stretching and warm up. So you're mostly fixated on that because that's what you're gleaning. But yeah, I do take observation. I observe what they're doing.
yeah. And in fact, you'll see whatever trainers they have available. You see before the game if you get there for pregame. Like let's say for 1 o'clock game, I get there sometimes 10:30, 10:45, and you just watch. You're just looking at to check out the scene and see who's on the field, and you see you'll see the players getting stretched before they start catching footballs. And I could tell you, being a member for Stretch Zone for 3 years, in fact, my anniversary is next month. It's been a game changer for me. And in fact, I just happened to see this guy. It's really funny. This guy's name is Greg. He's an avid listener of Inside the Birds, and I'm like, he looked familiar, and he definitely remembered because he heard it on our show. I happened to mention Stretch Zone. I mentioned Stretch Zone 3 years ago, and Greg was one of the people who came in. They heard me mention it for like 10 seconds, 15, 20 seconds. And Greg liked it. He's been a member and a client ever since. So good to see you, Greg. With 1G,
Check
by the
that
way.
out.
I happen to ask him that. There's only 1G. I know some people spell with 2Gs. So I'm going to see it. Look, I saw him in the Exon location. I most likely will be at Exon today, and I actually booked online. In fact, I did it on my phone through their portal. It's very easy, and they've got 12 locations, right, in PA and New Jersey, Chester County, Haverford. That's on the main line off of Lancaster Avenue near Suburban Square. Devon, which is near the Whole Foods. Exton, right up there in Chester County. Actually, it's right off the
Sure.
main line there. You know where that one is. That one is
The Exton one, I definitely know where it is.
the Whole
That's the
Foods.
one. Yeah, it's where there's the poorhouse.
Yep,
Place called the
right from
poorhouse.
literally, you can walk there in 5 seconds.
Yeah.
All right, good call. South Philly, Washington Ave, Montgomery County, where I grew up, in Elkins Park, off Aldrich Road, Yorktown Plaza, Upper Dublin, Drescher, off 611, Feasterville, Cherry Hill. See Mr. Mosher, Mount Laurel. Need to get Greg Cosell in there, because Greg now, by the way, see, he's lost a lot of weight. Greg was at, and I'm sure you know this because he loves to tell people this. I'm just joking.
He's playing basketball.
Exactly.
I knew it.
Yeah, he was 6'4", but see, as you get older, you shrink a little bit. Greg was an all-city shortstop and basketball player. He's from Brooklyn, right? Wasn't he from Brooklyn? Didn't he tell us
I
that?
believe that's what he said. I
Yeah.
learned something new about Greg every time I talk to him.
And you two are rock and rollers, by the way. You two are
Yeah.
You guys are kindred spirits with the rock and roll. So we got to get Greg going to the one in Mount
Well,
Laurel.
Greg will love the fact that I went to the Whiskey A Go Go and the.
Oh, you got to tell him that. By the way,
Yeah.
I don't know when you're going to see him again. You got to tell him. He'll love that. He'll want to know everything.
Yeah.
So Stretch Zone in New Jersey, Cherry Hill, Mount Laurel, Franklin Lakes, Northfield, and Princeton. Just go to stretchzone.com for your free 30-minute stretch. It is a game changer. You will become a member if you're smart, just like I did, coming up on 3 years. Stretchzone.com. Just hit the schedule your free stretch button, stretchzone.com. All right, Andrew, let's get to the injuries, okay? We promised people, so we talked about BG, obviously. For the Eagles, Andrew, the Darius Slay has a concussion, man. And remember, they're on a short week. Not as short as the Ravens. Strangeness of both teams playing at SoFi Stadium back-to-back days, and they're playing each other. Isn't that bizarre to you?
Yeah, it is. And actually, as I was leaving, I was finishing up my story. You look out there and you see them start to put the lightning bolt in the middle of the field, and they're starting to put the. Yeah, it was cool to see it like completely change over.
That's crazy. So, all right. So let's get to it. So we talked about the BG situation. Darius Slay, Isaiah Rodgers filled in. They picked on Rodgers. Okay. You and I saw Rodgers in training camp, you particularly, because you were at every practice. If Rodgers has to start here, what are your thoughts going forward?
Well, Isaiah is a very quick twitch athlete. He sees things very quickly. He closes on the football fast. He has the long speed to run down the field with anyone. But this is a game where physicality could really take shape. And when Derrick Henry turns the corner, you got to be able to make some tackles. And I think that you're going to see them probably try to test him on the perimeter there. He's had a couple missed tackles in that game. But I think in coverage, he's going to be able to hold up. I don't know that the Ravens passing attack is really anything to be to write home about, but they're still going to test him. They're not going to go to Quinyon. They're not going to go to Cooper DeJean. They're going to try and test Isaiah Rodgers in coverage, probably on some quick stuff, I would imagine, to see if they can get him out of position and take advantage of their run after they catch and force him to tackle. But yeah, I think that more often than not, he's done good things, but he's certainly going to be tested. And he's not coming off his best game against the Rams.
Yeah, I know they picked on him right away, man. Boy, they didn't waste any time. No question about that. Let me ask you this question. At the receiver position without Devontae Smith, and he didn't practice last week, so he's going to have to practice to be able to play in this game. We'll see what happens as the week progresses. Anything surprise you? Because not that going 12 personnel is a surprise. They play more 12 than they have in recent years, but Johnny Wilson played 70% of the snaps. What do you think about that?
That was surprising. Grant Calcaterra played a ton of snaps. I want to say 55% or something like that.
Correct? Yeah, correct.
And yeah, it's weird the way my mind works. I just remember this stuff. But yeah, I think Johnny Wilson was to see that kind of a drastic hike in snaps was really interesting to me. They like Johnny's done a good job blocking. They like his red zone presence, and I think behind the scenes, there's obviously a trust that's been developing between Johnny and Jalen Hurts. Jalen's actually gone out of his way to give him props, whether it be in training camp or I think it was earlier in the season. He mentioned Johnny Wilson unprompted, so there's something brewing there. So but I was surprised to see 70% of the snaps.
See, it's interesting because it's weird. If you look at the snap counts, you'd say, well, wow, wait a minute, they played a lot of 12, but understand something. Or actually a lot of 11 because Johnny Wilson is technically a receiver, but they don't use him as a receiver. They use him as a blocker, save one play in the red zone where they threw him the football.
Yeah.
So it's kind of misleading because Calcaterra played 55% of the snaps.
Right.
You know, and CJ Uzama, by the way, played 16 snaps, 22% of the snaps. So 16 snaps and 22% of it. So the other part of this is a guy you've told us about for weeks, in fact, months now. This guy I know you got to know last year. That's Ben Van Sumeren.
Yeah.
His 5 fullback snaps. What do you think of that?
He had a really nice block when towards in the red zone area. It was a 9-yard Saquon run, and I thought for a second I was like, are they going to hand the football off to Van Sumeren on the next play? And they came off the field right after that. But you're seeing that, Adam. It's still something that, and you and I talked about this last week, that it's going to remain in the playbook. I don't think he saw any offensive snaps against the Commanders. Saw 5 on Sunday against the Rams. Eventually, he's gonna factor in offensively, whether it be on a catch. No one's going to account for him offensively or defensively, and I think he might get a carry here or there. I think they're really pleased with what he's doing as a blocker. There's no hesitation. He knows exactly where he's supposed to go. And he mentioned to me it was very much like riding a bike. Played fullback at Michigan, so there wasn't a whole lot of a ramp up period or acclimation that was required.
All right, before we get to the Ravens updates, and there's one major one, there's one guy we got to talk about. Let's hear from our friends at Game Time Tickets.
Before you guys move on, Adam and Andrew, I know how much you love going to live sporting events, Sixers games, Flyers games, Phillies games, and I know you both love concerts as well. There's nothing like seeing live sports and live shows. It is an absolute thrilling experience, and the best experience you can get is using Game Time and their new feature called Game Time Picks. The Game Time app makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier because Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Listen, there's a lot of great games. There's college football, there's Penn State games, there's Temple, right? There's Eagles games that people are going to want to get tickets for. And of course, the Sixers and Flyers have all started up. A lot of great sporting events at home. And of course, some great concerts coming to Philly and Atlantic City as well. So you have to take advantage of the super deals on Game Time. It shows you the best value for where you're sitting in the arena. And there are other great tiers of deals as well. It is such an easy experience using the Game Time app. We tell you that you are covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. That includes event cancellation, job loss protection. I love the fact that you can see the view from your seat before you buy it just using the app right there. So get all in using the Game Time app and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code BIRDS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code BIRDS, B-I-R-D-S, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schiller makes sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
All right, Andrew. So for the Ravens, Roquan Smith, their star linebacker, did not play last week, and they went with sort of a inside backer by committee. And here's what happened. Now, we know the Ravens have arguably the best run defense. They were giving up chunks of yardage to Dobbins, and unfortunately, he had the running back for the Chargers. He had a knee injury, didn't return. And the Gus Edwards, a former Raven, replaced him. And they were going with a committee anyway between Dobbins and Edwards anyway. But and I wonder, because they don't give up a lot of yards, but man, Dobbins looked energized. Obviously, it was his former team. And we'll have to see what happens with Dobbins going forward. But with the Ravens, they went with a Trent Simpson, who's sort of a guy who does start some. Christian Welcher doesn't play a lot. And Malik Harrison's been there for years as their top backup inside backer. So we'll see on Sunday. But man, not having Roquan Smith, we'll see. He didn't practice last week. The injury happened the game before, didn't practice last week, obviously didn't play. So they're going to have to get through practice this week. But to me, this is a big thing, Andrew. If Roquan Smith, who's an absolute stud, he revived his career. You remember what happened with the Bears, didn't end well with him?
Yeah.
But man, boys, he's been a stud with the Ravens. This, to me, could be impactful if he doesn't play.
I think that's an area where the Eagles are going to look to exploit it right away and attack that defense, try to go right up the teeth of that defense with Saquon Barkley. Why would you not try to ride the hot hand and at least you allow Jalen Hurts to settle into the flow of the game if you're able to get that running game going. You're not trying to shoehorn the passing attack in there when maybe that's not the right course of action right away. Sometimes that leads to stalled drives and the offense looks a little clunky when you're trying to force things. But yeah, not having Roquan Smith, not only should that help them in the running game, but that intermediate level where Dallas Goedert, for some reason, still is largely absent of the Eagles' passing attack. That obviously has to change for that passing attack to get fully unlocked.
All right. Speaking of, let's do a couple minutes before we get out of here. This is interesting. So, the two teams that played at SoFi. What's ironic is both quarterbacks, Hurts and Jackson, only threw the ball 22 times. It's just kind of weird how that happened. But look, we know it's really odd. The Eagles, for the first time that I can remember, yeah, they ran the ball a decent amount in 22 with Miles Sanders, but this is next level. You've got two quarterbacks who could throw it, they could run it. You've got the Derrick Henry factor, which has been incredible. Lamar could always run it; he could throw it too. They're not only a heavy 12 personnel team; they'll play 3 tight ends. The Ravens. What do you think about this? This is such an amazing matchup, which is going to be in Baltimore Sunday.
I keep expecting a team to try and sell out to stop Saquon Barkley and really force the Eagles' hand to go pass heavy. And there hasn't been a team that's been equipped to stop Saquon Barkley. So until they do, I have to think the Eagles are going to continue to take to the ground game. And one improvement from last year that I've noticed is that they might get 3 or 4 yards at a time, but they stay committed to the run and knowing full well that the 45, 50-yard run's coming and that dam is eventually going to break. I think both teams are going to take the ground and pound approach and continue to make timely throws when necessary. But I would expect both Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley to be heavily featured in both respective offenses.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, it's been an amazing story. The Ravens, I remember being with them in training camp that, they thought that the mesh point between Jackson and Henry would be pretty special. Like the first 2 or 3 games are kind of feeling it out. Then the freight train took off. It hasn't really stopped. And they've kind of revamped their offensive line a little bit. They figured out a way to make it work. Linderbaum's really good, their center. They revamped the right side. Rosengarten, the rookie, starting at right tackle. Riley Stanley's finally staying healthy, Andrew, because that's been a big problem with him. And the guard spot, Falele is the right guard, and they kind of settled on him. Makari, Ricard, that fullback, he's a D tackle and a fullback. That dude's a pretty good football player. What a find he's been.
Yeah, it's interesting because now the Eagles have Van Sumeren as a linebacker, fullback, right, and the defensive lineman playing fullback. Now they play a smash mouth game, and the Eagles tackling is obviously going to have to be paramount. They have to rally to the football. When Derrick Henry gets a full head of steam, it's a collision course. And for Saquon Barkley, watching that Rams game, Adam, they did not want to tackle him in the third and fourth quarter. They wanted no part of Saquon Barkley. They wanted no part of trying to attack that offensive line of the Philadelphia Eagles. That's where the Eagles have been now playing a bully ball style. They impose their will. So it's kind of strength on strength there. We'll have to see which team wins out.
Before we get out of here, I didn't know you were going to say that. So when you say that, and obviously I'm assuming you're talking about look from the press box where they're all 22.
Yeah.
What are you seeing in their body language or from the Rams? I guess obviously the front seven. What did you see that would make you say something like that?
Kind of throw their arms up. They look gassed. Maybe
Mm,
they're not flowing to the football with as much urgency as you saw earlier in the game. But and that kind of speaks to why I believe the Eagles are so equipped to play their best football when it gets colder, because the game that they play right now, running the football and playing stout defense, travels. It translates well.
sure.
And I'm watching in real time the offensive line really wear down a defense that starts out with a lot of energy, and then they're not able to sustain that throughout the game.
Wow, that's it's just so funny because the Eagles. I'm trying to go back through my mind of what power backs they've had over the years, who was like the starter.
Not really. You have to really think back. Deuce
Yeah,
Staley, I guess.
to a
Well,
degree. Yeah,
he had some power. I
yeah.
liked his contact balance, but McCoy wasn't more of a finesse runner. DeMarco Murray, I don't know what you would
It didn't
classify
work
him
here.
as. Yeah.
It didn't work. But it's funny because Saquon was more of the knock on Saquon, despite being 232 to 235, was he was more of a finesse runner with the Giants. But it's more, I think you hit it on in passing. It's more the line is road grading and still athletic. But you look at it, right, left to right. You look at my lot of 6'8", right? Somewhere between 375 and 390. We reported this at the time. My lot was 402 to 404 at one point when they told him to lose weight, going back like 3 or 4 years ago. You look at Dickerson, who's 6'6" plus. I don't know what he weighs, but now how well he is into 300s. Jurgens around 6'3". Back then, maybe the biggest guard in the NFL. What do you think he weighs, by the way? I have no idea. I mean, I know he lost a lot of weight over the last years, but my God, what is he?
I wouldn't even know where to
Yeah.
guess. 360
Sure.
because he's
Eh,
tall.
Well, it's funny. I know the Jets won him between 360 and 365. They told me at the time he was well over 400 at one point, but he blocks off the sun. And you look at Lane, is Lane, what is he? Without looking, is he 6'7"?
I
Six
think
and a half,
he's
6'7"?
6'6".
Okay, right. Plus,
I don't know. I don't know if that's right, but yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, but I mean that
Crazy.
offensive line, the mass and the combo blocks that you see at
Mm,
times. You're also seeing a willingness from someone like a Grant Calcaterra. I thought he did a really good job combo blocking with, I want to say, maybe Becton on a certain play. So they're getting a collective effort. That's the buy-in that I was talking about.
sure.
And right now, the Eagles' secret weapon is that offensive line.
One more thing, because we haven't talked about this in a long time. The value of coaching. Now, I know you're in training camp, so you could see these guys work. Anything you picked up from your observations or intel from watching these coaches or hearing stuff, whether it's Jamal Singleton, it's Stout. Obviously, you've been around. You know he's a great coach, and the Eagles love him.
Sure.
Chip Kelly, it's one of the few good gifts the Eagles gave us. Chip was Stout. But anything about the coaches that has impressed you? Go either side of the football, whatever comes to your mind.
Yeah, I'll go with one that we don't often talk about a lot, Jason Michael, in
Okay.
terms of really refining the blocking area. There's yeah, it's a 1-2, right? I think you're seeing the improvement from someone like a Grant Calcaterra, who told me that he models himself after Dallas Goedert and watching how Dallas blocks. EJ Jenkins, I talk to him almost every week.
Hmm.
He mentioned that I model myself after Dallas Goedert, the way that he does it, but he also mentioned how Jason Michael has helped him tap into that area of his game, and you're seeing a lot more complete. They have much more well-rounded skill sets. I would say Christian Parker. I see him really hands-on with the defensive backs, working with Slay and Quignon, getting their footwork right. He has a lot of energy. He's just 32 years old, and his
Wow.
ability to kind of explain the why behind the calls, I think, is something that really sits well with a lot of players. It's easy to grasp, and I just think that there's a lot of relatability there. And Bobby King with the block
Yeah.
deconstruction. That's been a point of emphasis that I think you're seeing really take shape on the field.
Hang on here. Christian Parker's younger than Slay? Is that really?
Yeah,
Wow, I didn't even know that. That's unbelievable.
yeah,
That is like I have to go back in my mind for whenever I've heard of a coach being younger than the players he's coaching or play or whatever. Just almost hard to believe. Wow. And to get his respect, because man, they're balling out. I mean, they're secondary. This is something I got to tell you before we close here, Andrew. I never saw this coming to this defense. I don't know about you, but being a training camp, I know you'd said you were higher on their defense than most people, but this is ridiculous. They're the best defense in
I
football right
simply
now.
was saying at their best they could be at 15 to 17. That was me being optimistic. I was like, once they hit their stride, I could really see them falling within that 15 to 17 range. Well, they're playing like one of the better units in the NFL. I don't think
Right
anyone
now. The best.
I don't think
arguably.
anyone could have foreseen that.
No. And is there a weak link on their defense? Anyone?
No, I mean, a position group, edge rusher, is something to keep an eye on. But I think as a whole, in totality, they're pretty strong at all three levels.
I agree with you. All right. Mosher Jeff will be with us, I believe, in our next show. Andrew, phenomenal job. Thank you for filling in. Check him out on InsideTheBirds.com, the Rookie Diary, everything else that Andrew's doing. Check him out on Twitter. Check us out on Twitter. We'll speak to you next time. Thank you.
Be sure to check out our friends at PHLSportsNation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at PHLSportsNation.com and on Twitter at PHLSportsNation.